seam I'm going to show you today is a flat fell seam, like on this jumper. It's a very strong seam. It's used for children's clothes, sportswear, sometimes on men's shirts. The one thing that it cannot be used on is fabric that's too thick. So this is a lightweight denim, and it works perfectly fine. But if the fabric is too thick, then it's not going to work. But it produces a really great, flat, strong seam. This seam, similar to the French seam, we're going to do the opposite to our normal seams. We're going to put wrong sides together and stitch the first part of the seam on the right side. Depending on your fabric, this is just a lightweight cotton and it's just a sample, so I can just use the 5/8 of an inch guide on the sewing machine. But if you have a fabric that's a bit more tricky to handle, you may want to baste the seam first. So just a regular straight stitch, 5/8 of an inch seam. So to press the seam, again, I'm going to press the stitching into the fabric, just like this, before I then open out and press the seam in one direction, taking care not to make a ridge, but to really press that seam out. The next stage is to trim the underneath seam allowance to about 1/8 of an inch. And then we turn the top seam allowance, and I usually turn it so it meets the first line of stitching. But if you wanted a wider seam, then you could turn less fabric and make it wider. This one I'm going to take all the way to the stitching, and I'm going to press it first. Again, on a garment with a longer seam, you may want to baste, but this is only a few inches. So I'm just going to rely on staying in place while I stitch. Needle in position so it's close to the fold, and that's what you will be watching carefully. And then another final press, and I like to press on both sides. Here's another thing to think about. If sometimes you see not the two lines of stitching on the right side, but you see one line, and I've seen this on men's shirts. So if you did only want the one line of stitching, then you would change the process and start off with right sides together like we do a regular seam.